The Supreme Court did not address refunds.
Sure, they didn't address refunds. That is clearly going to be up to you, which is why
No, Dana. It is not up to me. It is up to
you.
It is not up to the administration. It is up to the lower court. Let's just be clear on that.
Yeah. That was the response from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent when asked about whether businesses will receive refunds after the Supreme Court struck down the president's sweeping global tariffs. Joining us now, the co-host of the Weekend Primetime on MS Now and economics editor at The Bulwark, Catherine Rampell. It's good to have you on the show, Catherine. That's one of the many questions that's sort of hanging out there because of the Supreme Court ruling. You have governors now expecting refunds for the tariffs that were levied, and the Supreme Court has deemed unconstitutional. What happens? Where does this go from here? And are refunds a logical next step?
That is an excellent question. Yes, refunds should be due, not to U.S. consumers, by the way, but to the companies that remitted those tariffs. So the court said that these tariffs are unconstitutional. The money was collected unconstitutionally. We had the USTR, the former U.S. Trade Representative Mike Froman, on my show on Saturday, who basically said, yeah, if the government collects this money and it's unlawful, they have to give it back. But of course, Donald Trump is throwing up more obstacles and basically saying, make me. And the Supreme Court did not specify exactly how that money needs to be given back or how people apply for it, which was a big open question to begin with. And so they're deciding to play hardball, they being the Trump administration, and saying, let the lower courts sort it out. Now, as I mentioned, it will be companies that are ultimately due this money, even if they passed along the costs to their consumers, which a lot of them did. They paid the bill, but then they said, OK, we've had these higher costs. We're just going to raise our prices downstream. So if you paid, an extra 20% for your Coach handbag or a violin or a tattoo, for that matter, tattoos are even affected by all of this, you are not seeing that money come back.
So, Catherine, a little bit of guesswork here because we don't know really what the president is going to do next. He's been blustering about global tariffs, 10, 15%, talking about licensing, talking about all sorts of ways to try to make up this revenue. Some he seems to have the authority to do, but temporary. Others clearly going to end up in court again. How do you see, these tariffs are a linchpin of his economic policy. Where do you see the White House going from here?
Not just a linchpin. It is the economic policy of this administration. It is really the only thing that this administration, or this president, I should say, seems to care about when it comes to the economy. Not affordability, not reducing cost of living. It is about tariffs. And so they are scrambling around to look for other tariff authorities that are available to them. And as you point out, there are some. However, if you look back to the court filings in this very Supreme Court case, the administration said that they do not have the ability to use the tariff authority that they are now calling on, that they are now invoking to raise tariffs. So it's going to be a big problem for them. That basically the Trump administration had said in filings, look, the reason we're doing this thing under national emergency is that some of the other stuff that Congress has said we can do doesn't really apply here. Now they're turning around and saying, actually, it does apply here because it's the only option that they have. So I think it's going to be litigated. In the meantime, businesses are still left in this sort of limbo where they don't know what their costs will be from month to month, or really from day to day. Like Friday, they were another 10%, and then Saturday they were another 15%. They don't know if the courts will ultimately strike these down as well. They don't know that even if they persist, even if these tariffs are allowed to stand, if they'll expire in 150 days. So the costs are there, the uncertainty is there, and all of that weighs on the U.S. economy because businesses are probably going to hold off making decisions on hiring, on investment, on replenishing their inventories because they still don't know the rules of the road.
Yeah, and certainly Congress, the snowstorm is delaying Congress's return to Washington this week. But when they do get back, real question, what appetite, if any, does Congress have taking on tariffs? Catherine, before you go, you mentioned affordability. That is still the key word right now in the economic discourse. The president continues to downplay it as a hoax. I would tend to doubt that he'll use his State of the Union tomorrow night to say that he was wrong. But we know that poll after poll suggests Americans really, really care about this. What does the White House, how are they addressing it?
That's a good question. As you point out, Plan A is to say that it's not an issue, it's a hoax, it's a con job or whatever the president has been tweeting about. Plan B is to blame immigrants because whenever there's a problem anywhere, the culprit must be immigrants. So you'll see Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in particular saying the reason why housing costs are so high is because of all of those illegals who are stealing your housing. However, they have, of course, been rounding up hundreds of thousands of immigrants at this point, and house prices are not falling. In fact, if anything, the fact that immigrants are disproportionately employed in home building may mean that in some markets house prices go up because we have a housing shortage and you have fewer people to build the housing. I think you're probably going to hear Donald Trump talk about some other kind of fig leaves that he has proposed on the affordability front. He's talked about banning institutional investors, which Democrats like as well, but will not do anything to affect housing prices in this country. Institutional investors own like less than 1% of single family housing stock. You might hear him talk about a 50-year mortgage. Again, won't really do anything. The things that he can do, he does not want to do. Those are, again, getting rid of tariffs. They are helping, giving his blessing to extend the health insurance subsidies that just expired. And a number of other things, like they rolled back food stamps. They eventually are rolling back Medicaid. Those are all things that raise the cost of living, that make life less affordable, that Donald Trump and his party do not seem on board with fixing.
Catherine Rampell, thank you very much. We'll be watching the weekend primetime right here on MS Now and coming.